Hi, my name is Tom and this is my channel Integral Views. I attended the far left march in London recently, or protest, against the far right. It was Love, Hope and Unity. That was on March the 28th, 2026 of course. So why did I attend it? Well, I went there to talk to people. I wanted to get a better understanding directly from them, right, with positive intent to try and understand their worldviews better. See if there's anything that I'm missing. And some of those conversations were truly bizarre. They displayed a lot of cognitive dissonance that was so obvious that it's very difficult to understand how the person that I was speaking to could have missed it. Now, I'm going to talk you through these conversations and then give you a summary of the ideology and just my views in general on the event. Let me start off by saying that I believe that this far left ideology is the enemy within. It's a very serious problem that we have. And so I take it very seriously to understand the ideology and then expose it and eventually defeat it. Because no matter who wins the next general election or what happens in politics in the future, these people and this ideology will not simply evaporate. It won't simply by itself disappear. The people won't vanish. They still exist. And so the way to deal with this is to have dialogue, to have conversations, to understand what's happening and then make counterpoints in, let's say, with positive intent. All right. It's very difficult sometimes, and I fully understand that. I think we need to avoid straw manning the opposition. So we need to avoid straw manning the far left, because that doesn't help us to actually address the issue. It just demonizes, and there's a hell of a lot going on the left toward the right in that regard, which I'll talk through in this video. So we need to be accurate about what the ideology actually is, what their beliefs are, what they're intending to do, and then address it as it truly exists. And toward the end of this video, I'm going to propose some potential solutions and how we can actually make progress. Because it's one thing understanding it, it's one thing moaning about it and disliking it, but it's another thing to actually come up with solutions and try to address it. Because I think so many people want to know, well, where do we go from here? We know we've got issues, right? Where do we go from here? So at the end of this video, I will put forward some things that we could potentially do. I'm going to start by giving my general impressions of the event, and as I speak I will show some videos and photos that I took. These are mine from the day. Now, overall there was a general undercurrent of anger. I definitely felt that. So I think that this whole unity thing is really a surface level concept, right, for them. Essentially, it is just providing this cover for anger to be expressed, and then this aggression to be expressed. There was so many placards that were about fighting, fight the far right, fight everything. It's all fight, 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 and we saw Zara Sultana, a far left MP, who was talking about fighting the far right or fighting the fascists in the streets. So there was a huge amount of fighting, right, that was being spoken about. And this general undercurrent of aggression, actually. And yeah, it was like what just generally what they seem to be doing to a large extent is they're expressing aggression and anger that's the result of what they believe is oppression. So of course the economic situation in the United Kingdom is not good at the moment. We haven't seen any rise in living standards for multiple decades really, and things just seem to be getting worse. And so this causes a lot of anger, and then the anger is directed at what they call racism and fascism, which I don't believe is accurate whatsoever. It's a straw man on their part, but it's a way for them to express this anger. So another thing I'd say is it was majority women at the event. I went to the Unite the Kingdom rally as well, and I would say that was majority men. And this event, this far left event, was majority women. So make of that what you will. Now, something else I would say is that for people who talk about these flag, right, I'll put the word on the screen. You know what I'm saying. This is what they'll say. They have these really insulting words. Now, but for people who complain so much about flags being flown, I've never seen so many flags in my life of different kinds, every imaginable kind of flag that you can envision. It was unbelievable. Everyone seemed to have their own cause, their own flag, their own colours. It was ridiculous. Whilst I'm at it, I just want to talk about that aggression that we're seeing from the far left. So we see all of these attacks, these terrorist attacks that are occurring on infrastructure. We saw the assassination of Charlie Kirk, an attempted assassination of Donald Trump, and just a lot of activity, right, that are associated with these groups. We saw this attack on these Jewish ambulances recently in the United Kingdom. So we can see that a lot of this aggression, a lot of these violent acts are coming from the left, and that consortium, that grouping. And basically what I'm saying is they're using this straw manning of the right, calling it fascist and racist, as justification for acting out aggressively, and it's an incredibly dangerous situation. Of course, we have Antifa, and we have a lot of these underground Discord groups that go on the left, which are just disgraceful and disgusting. I'm not going to talk more about them. But, there is this real nasty undercurrent on the left. And as the grand finale of the event, we saw the Green Party leader, Zach Palansky, dancing on stage with Hannah Spencer, who is a recently elected MP for Gorton and Denton, a Green Party MP. And she is just out of this world crazy. And I made whole videos on her, so I won't go on. But they were dancing alongside these men who were barely dressed in, these kind of clothing. And think about the audience, yeah? There were young people in the audience. This is completely inappropriate. It's just, it was just horrific. But what do you expect? Of course they're going to do this. At the event, we saw the NEU, that is the largest teachers' union in the United Kingdom. I was really surprised by this. They had their own little area. They had their own flags, their own signs, and it was all organised. And of course, the NEU, the largest teachers' union in the United Kingdom, is directly anti-reform. So they have signs that are anti-Farage, anti-reform. What does it say that our teachers in our schools are actively anti-reform, who are the leading political party? It says that we have this ideology that's within our teachers, okay, that is opposed to the general views of the population in Britain. And that is a very major problem. In addition to the teachers' union being there, we also had this PCS. It was really weird because PCS are this group that involves a lot of people from the civil service. And I went up and I spoke to them, a couple of people, and they said, yeah, it's civil service, essentially. And I thought, wait, civil service at a political protest against reform? This is very strange behaviour from the civil service. So this is a major, major problem, and I think the next party that gets in has got to do something about it. It's really difficult without being authoritarian, but this is a major problem. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is talk you through these conversations I had with some of these individuals. I'll explain them and the context of the conversation. Now, all of these conversations were really positive, actually. And I started off by saying, let's find common ground. I'm a centrist and I want to understand your views better to make sure that I've got it right in my head. That's why I'm here. I told them I went to the United Kingdom event as well. So it started off from that ground. And then I tried to create common ground by agreeing with them on some points. So we had a common consensus at the beginning. It's often quite easy to agree on the problems, economic problems, wealth inequality, people struggling, right? But then that's when it gets difficult after that, because then the reasons for it, the causes for it become the issue. Now, but all of the conversations were with positive intent and were generally were respectful. There was no issue. I didn't film any of them or record any of them, so I'll explain. But the reason for that is because I think that when people are on camera and they're being recorded, it makes them more guarded. And I didn't really want that. There were people doing that, but I thought better just to have the conversation and now relay it to you. Okay, so the first conversation I had was a weird one. It was with who I'm going to call Anti-Flag Man. So Anti-Flag Man gave me this. I'll put a photo of it so you can read it more clearly. It says, "Don't let the flags get you down, you get the flag down." And so basically what this is he's protesting against the raising of the British and English flags, against Raise the Colours. And so here's how my conversation generally went with him. I said, why do you protest? Why do you have an issue with people raising the flags of our countries in our country? Isn't it something that unites everyone who's here? It can be a symbol for us all to unite around and build unity, which is what the far left say they want to do. And his response was, well, it makes people feel uncomfortable and unwelcome. And so, of course, I was saying, well, why would it make them feel uncomfortable and unwelcome? This is the country that they're in. Shouldn't they want to associate with it? Shouldn't it make them feel good? And isn't it just a representation that we have a major disunity issue that they don't? And therefore, shouldn't the response be to make them feel an association with that flag, given that it is Britain, this is England, this is our culture and history? And he said that, well, essentially, they shouldn't just be flown in public on lampposts just by anybody who wants to do it. And so then I said, well, look around you. There are many, many different kinds of flags. I've seen Palestinian flags flown on lampposts, etc. So I asked, is your issue just with any flag being flown, or is it specifically the English and British flags? And he was basically cornered at this point, because I knew that he was thinking, I'm fine, I want these Palestinian flags, all these other kind of flags flown, because I feel comfortable with that, right? Because his ideology is the same as everyone else's ideology there. It is anti-British. They believe that Britain is the villain in the world because of colonialism and our history. So that's what they've been convinced of, right? That's the core underlying belief that connects all of this, by the way. That's their ideology. Now, so I knew that that was the case. But he was cornered because he knew he couldn't say that because of our conversation prior to this. And so he ended up saying, well, it's just really any flag. And so I said, so you're out protesting against any flag being flown on any lamppost or in public at all. So it was really weird. And I think that essentially, like, there was no way out for him. That's where he ended up. So that was the first conversation. Good start. Okay, the second conversation was really interesting. So this guy had a placard. I'm going to write kind of what it said, and it really struck me, and I was like, okay, this guy, I need to talk to this guy. Why would he be holding a placard that says this? So he was really against the flags again, and specifically in this really aggressive and insulting way against people who would fly the British flag. Now, of course, there are very good reasons to fly the British flag. So I started with him essentially outlining, we spoke about racism to begin with. So I said, look, I'm not racist at all, because his placard also was talking about racists. He was very insulting on it. So he was basically saying everyone who flies the British or English flag is a racist and a fascist, and they shouldn't do it. So we have to fight them. Essentially was his view, right? So I started on common ground saying, well, I am not a racist. And yet I think patriotism and nation state identity and culture is very important because it creates a sense of unity in the country where everyone can associate with that instead of being all in these little split off tribes that we see that the left are creating. And basically he was very aggressive, not toward me, but just generally in his ideology. And his son was with him. So his son was maybe 19 or 20 years old. And so they felt very strongly about this and felt they were really on this crusade to do the right thing, fighting against racism, etc. And when they came to me, and I'm basically saying, look, I'm not racist. Here are my reasons why I think this is important. It's for the greater good of people in this country and for the world. And I explained it to him. He was kind of lost, to be honest. Look, frankly, it didn't take me long to cut through all of the belief systems, the ideologies that these people had. Make of that what you will. To be honest, it really didn't take long whatsoever. And it was very clear in the conversations that they didn't have any kind of comeback and they were kind of struggling, right? Granted, I do think about this stuff a lot and, I do kind of go over it and dig into it. So fair enough. Now, the really interesting thing about the man who had this really aggressive placard, he ended up saying it's going to come to fighting. Again, fighting came up. It was aggressive. So him and his son were saying, well, ultimately that's what it ends up in. So, the sooner the better, really. So he was saying, well, again, he wants to fight. That's what it was, this recurring theme. And I ended that conversation essentially saying, well, look, you want disunity and not unity, right? And the thing is, all the way through it, I was trying to create common ground. I was saying what we really need to do is to pull back from the real extremes and find common ground and something that actually works and have conversations across these groups, right? Across the the divide, these echo chambers that exist as a result of social media. That's what I was there doing. But he was really not interested in that. He was really interested in expressing negative emotion and aggression in his own way with his son, right? Feeling vindicated, like he's fighting for something, all emotions, like narcissism, really, which is dangerous because then it turned into, well, I want it to be violent as well eventually. So, yeah, I mean, not good. Next, I spoke to someone from the Socialist Party who gave me this, and I won't go through this in great detail, but essentially we found very easy common ground with regard to wealth inequality, both both nationally and internationally, and that was an issue that should be addressed. But then it really went off the rails when they started telling me about how it was the British Empire that's caused essentially all of the harms in the world, caused all of the division, are racist, fascist, and that's why we need to be against Britain and British culture and reform it, change it, bring people in, change it, etc. So really went off the rails there. Now, I'm just going to point out some kind of aggressive language within this document here. And it shows how this is really a cover. There's like a moral cover for this real nasty aggression, this negative emotion that's being expressed, which is really quite dangerous. So starting off, we've got fight racism. Of course, fight is said many times. They say far-right thugs like Robinson and racist right-wing populists like Nigel Farage see the anger at falling living standards as an opportunity to exploit. I really don't think that's true whatsoever. That is just a complete mischaracterization of both of them. Okay, and here it says, the strength of the trade unions is the 6 million workers of all backgrounds organised and capable of fighting attacks on working class living standards and of fighting racism. The thing is about this, the word fight, it's this struggle, this fight that is really, it's just this aggression that it was really symbolic of the whole event and the whole movement. And that conversation with the Socialist Party individual really ended when I started talking about how mass migration was fueled by big business, by capitalism, to bring in millions of people into the country, to lower wages, increase profits, increase shareholder returns and dividends. That's what actually happened. And so the connection between the migrant situation and the wealth inequality situation really broke the narrative for them, and they couldn't account for it whatsoever. So, again, it was an interesting conversation though. And going from the Socialist Party, I then moved on to the Communist Party. And I bought this paper, right, from them for £2. Weird, isn't it? That's not very communist. I had to buy it. Very capitalist of them. But in any case, look, thing is, they were really decent, right? And they were students. They were relatively young, bit naive, but quite intelligent. And this is the thing. Intelligent enough to know a certain amount that can be quite dangerous, but they lacked wisdom and experience, and they really didn't have an answer for a lot of what I was talking about. But they were right about some things because they understood the core monetary system and how inflation causes essentially wealth inequality over time as asset prices go up. But again, they hadn't accounted for migration, but they had gone a step further. This is really interesting, so hear me out on this. So they were better than the Socialist Party individuals because they'd thought about this in terms of, well, it needs to be a global system, right? So you have to have a system where it's across the world. It's like a communist global system. What they said was it had to be global. Now, and that was in response to me saying, well, why did Leninism fail? And why did it fail under Mao? Why does it always fail? Why has Venezuela failed? And so their answer was because it has to be applied globally. And I understand the logic. Because the way the capitalist system works is that if you raise business taxes and you try to fight against the global corporations, they'll just leave. The capital will flee. And this is what Gary Stevenson hasn't addressed and isn't correct about. It's why wealth taxes won't work, right? It's why socialism will not work, because we exist within a global capitalist system, like it or not, right? Free market system. Now, what I was saying to them is that if you apply communism or socialism within one nation state, within a larger global free marketplace, capital marketplace, then you will lose. You will lose. You might idealistically be correct that that might be the best way for the whole world to function. Probably not, though. Actually, pretty much definitely not. But even if you are right on that, you have to get there globally. So how are you going to do that? Because other countries aren't going to do it. They're going to work in their self-interests. And this is really interesting. So this comes down to human nature, because a lot of what the left doesn't do is account properly for human nature. Because what are China going to do? They're going to work in their self-interest, their group self-interests. And they're going to take advantage. If we weaken ourselves, they will take advantage. And this is reflected in Zach Polanski saying, we'll denuclearize, and then ask Putin to do the same. It's this naivety. And you can see this reflected in international law and stuff with human rights. We are being taken advantage of because we're not accounting for the reality of human nature properly. This be nice, be kind, just be kind and everything will be fine. No, it won't. If you're just being kind and not protecting yourself, people will take advantage. So this is all idealistic, naive, student level thinking. So those were the conversations I had. Now, I want to talk about the ideology itself because I think it's so important we understand this and have these conversations. So I'm going to steelman it. What they want, right, I'm going to assume positive intent, excluding the Islamists, okay? What the left want really is this open border utopia. So they believe that you could have a situation where people all live in love and peace and harmony, where there's very little wealth inequality, everyone just gives and cares for each other, and people can go where they want to go, and we all love each other around the world forever and ever. Love and kisses and hugs forever and ever. That's what they believe and that's what they want. And so it gives them this sense of, I'm really fighting for something really good. And I'm really fighting against something really bad, which is this fascism and racism that the right are doing. But they're mischaracterizing the right. Because what the right are doing actually is not all, but a lot of people on the right are accounting for human nature and what would actually happen. So they want what's best for people as well, but they are actually more accurately kind of seeing how human nature works and what would actually happen if you denuclearized, yeah? Putin would just take advantage. But I think a lot of people on the left do have this positive intent. They do want something good. They have this nice vision in their mind of a clean, lovely world and no fighting, no war, right? Everybody loving each other, caring for each other, moving where they want, and all good, lovely. Of course, as well, they absolutely do believe, as I've said, that Britain is like the main villain, not just Britain, but the whole Western system. So the United States as well. So we're the main villains in the global story, despite the fact that we've done such huge innovations and benefited the world so massively. We're still the villain somehow. Now I'm going to talk about some of my beliefs and how some of the things that they believe on the left could be incorporated, right, that are quite similar. So essentially, I agree with regard to unity. We want to live in a community that has a sense of belonging, in-group belonging and pride. And I believe the best way for that to happen is through patriotism, a connection to our history, our culture, and that is British history and culture. And so my point is that the far left are battling directly against actual unity, and they're creating these tribes in an aggressive way based on falsehoods that they come up with. But some other ways that I agree with them are on wealth inequality. So I think that international and national wealth inequality does cause harm, right? And it's a result of predatory capitalism to some extent that needs controlling a bit more than we're doing right now. But I don't go as far as them into socialism and communism because I understand how that breaks down and doesn't actually reflect just human nature overall, yeah? But I also believe that we have been betrayed by our politicians because British people have never wanted this many foreign-born people in the country at any one time. We never supported mass migration. We now have 20% foreign-born people in the United Kingdom, and we never asked for that. So it's causing a great schism between the elite, between our political elite and the people. And so that needs to be dealt with. And the way that we deal with that is by getting the foreign-born population down to more 1990s levels, okay? And that's really done by dealing with illegal migration and reversing a lot of the Boris wave and dealing with ILR. Now, this actually is really important because in order for us to have this sense of unity that the left want and in-group belonging that will apply to everyone who remains in Britain after that point, then we actually have to have a rules-based order and we have to have a sense where people who are British, born British, don't feel like they're being taken advantage of, because it creates this othering situation where we are being taken advantage of. Look at the illegal migrant situation. It's a really big problem. So we have to absolutely 100% protect our borders, and we need to deport everyone who comes here illegally. That's how we protect unity, and we protect our British culture and a sense of in-group belonging for everyone who's here. When we don't do it, it undermines that. Okay, I said I'd talk about some solutions. Now, specifically with regard to the issue of the teachers who are very far left, that's a massive problem, because that's the environment that our children are baked within on a daily basis while the rest of us are working. And that's a big problem as far as I'm concerned. And so I think we need some teacher training. We need teachers to go on courses that teach them about the reality of British culture and provide a view that is different from the view that they've become extreme on, right? So it talks to them from a perspective of the benefits of British culture, how a lot of the mass migration that has occurred is not good, how gender identity and that whole gender theory thing is harmful for children. It should be super obvious that it is, because ultimately it's just against objective reality. I think really we need teacher training. We need teachers to go on courses that teach them about patriotism, about British culture. We need to take that very seriously. Then I think also we need to have people who go into schools who are specialists in this regard, who understand how we abolish slavery and many other things. So we need to see it as a virtue to take pride in Britain, because taking pride in Britain and having that patriotism is what creates a sense of unity across the culture for everyone who's living here. It is not creating a sense of unity to trash British culture. That is not a good thing to be doing. Another thing is a very strong element throughout the entire protest was about racism. So everything was racism. That was their excuse for everything. So if you remove that piece and you make it absolutely clear that it's not racism, right, what the right is saying largely, then you remove the entire argument. And then so I think that that's a really important piece that needs to be done. Tommy Robinson's done a lot of this. I don't know how he deals with it. He's called racist all the time, and yet a lot of his friends are not. Like, I was at the United Kingdom rally, and there were people from all ethnicities there. This misunderstanding and mischaracterization has got to stop, especially on mainstream media, right? So I think that we need to cut through on that. And I think just a lot more conversations need to happen. People, you might think, well, it's just one conversation. It's not really a practical solution. But actually, that's really what's got to happen culturally in Britain. It's millions of people learning and then speaking to other people that will change culture and society. People have got away with these extremist beliefs that are self-destructive for far too long because people have been too scared to have those conversations. All right, now I've rambled on for far too long already. Look, I hope you enjoyed the video. It was a crazy day, but I'm really glad that I went there. I had some interesting conversations, I learned a lot, and I'm glad that I went. Okay, like the video if you liked it, subscribe to my channel if you haven't already and you'd like to hear more from me. You could also hype the video, share the video. I also have a Buy Me a Coffee link in the description of this video if you would like to support me. Okay, until next time, cheers.